Qu'est-ce la vie que porte a l'amiende? Qu'est-ce la vie que porte a de l'euro? Qu'est-ce la vie que porta a quella gente che non ci sta in grazia più, Signore? E la giustizia è stata sempre innanzi a chi si governa più cor che Padre Eterno, Figlio e Spirito Santo. Prima di noi non c'è stata mai la morte, ma sempre ci sarà l'eterne piante. Non c'è sta speranza a chi passa sta porta. Queste parole che non danno pace stavano scritte per segnare la sorte. E io, a mastra, quando mi dispiace. Essa risposta, tu hai da essere saggia, ci vuole la forza e fatene capace per far tra questa gente io viaggio. E datemi una mano, ma guardate come per darmi in petto io coraggio. Mi sono sentita presto a rinfrancata, mi sono sentita forte e fiduciosa, e in mezzo a chi la gente siamo entrata. Sentiva dentro l'aria cupa e affosa, e piante, e strilla, e brutte imprecazioni che m'hanno fatta triste e pensierosa. Si sentiva ietà maledizione, biastemma e tanta brutta parlatura che non l'avevo sentita da nessuno. E stu fracasso nella rivoltura canal serena e terra a mulinella e si girava che face paura a me, ma avendo un dito io cervello e io a io mastra. Dimmelo mo tu, chi so chi sta dannata senza appello? A sta maniera le vedemmo nu. So condannato chi a mon non ha tenuto vizia né virtù. E a mezzo s'aggazzare su confon l'angelo senza fede, ma egoista senza essere ribelle, che a strafon non può nascegna né vicino a Cristo si può a ritrovare, ma a mezza via a soffrì, pinà e campà triste. Poi ha chiesto, Mastra, che gli pia chi sta gente a lamentarsi forte a sta maniera? Ma risposta, figlia, chiste non può spirare manca la morte, e il dolore gli sta sempre annanzi, che avessero voluto un'altra sorte. L'umon a chissà ne gli dà speranza di farsi un buon nome. Si brava cammina, guarda e ne gli dà importanza. E appressa una bandiera che girava, che una velocità a togliere fiata, a malapena il lucchio l'afferrava. Gli avarete l'anima dannata, amor, tante da non crede che morta tanta gente ave struncata. Ma in mezzo a tanta mi è sembrata a vedere un'ombra nera da faccia, conosciuta. Era colui che n'ha tenuto fede e da vigliacca ha fatto io rifiuto. Hai capito che sti disgraziati né a dimugna hanno piaciuto. E mo corrono, vanno senza fiata, tutta la nuda, in mezzo ai turmenti da vespa e da muscuna, pizzicata. Poi, della faccia, tutto al momento, culava sangue e lacrime, e allipita tanta virma gli davano tormento. Dopo, hai visto gente riunita in faccia alla riva di un fiume nero. Hai un mastro hai detto, si licrita, fammi sapere, perché sa gente spera di far presto passare l'altra riva? E se non passa, strilla e si dispera? Li può sapere soltanto quando arriva il fiume a Cheronta a toglie fiata. Ma sta risposta secca mi pentiva d'avergli troppe cose addomenate. Per paura di dargli nucimento, inzina il fiume n'hai più parlato. Gli capelli bianchi, a un momento ve contra nu, guidando nu battello, nu vecchio, che strillava, ma la gente! Guai a chi n'ubbidisce e a sa ribella. Iva trasporta tutta l'altra riva, a dalla notte eterna e senza stelle. Scansati tu, chi sia ancora viva, non sta mai che sei morta, ma canda vista, che non mi muoveva. Ecco, non si passa, io trasporto per te, sta un'altra riva, t'hai detto, sta una barca leggera che ti porta. Caro, non ti impiccia, che già sta scritto. L'imbarca è ecco, e chi l'ha stabilita comanda sopra e a tutta. E state zitto. Caronte, a sti parole, si è zittita, ma il vecchio, circondata da fuoco, seguitava a girare come un impazzito. E chi l'anima nuda, a poco, cambiavano colore. Chi lì dentro facevano rumore. E a chi gli loca gli astemmavano Dio e li parente, li più lontana di stripinata, li più vicina a essa, tutto quinta. Dopo, piagnendo, si sono allontanata da chi la riva nera e maledetta, a dove stanno l'alma disgraziata che di Dio non teme la vendetta. Caronte, a una, la riccoglie li latte in urena per dispetta. E come d'autunno cascano le foglie a una, fino a che la rama d'ogni verdura ne rimane spoglia. Così chi l'alma maledetta e infame si ritrova ammucchiata nell'aliva. In chi non cenna Caronte se le chiama e lo trasporta. Intanto si riuniva l'altra anima, aspettavano, strillano di essere trasportata all'altra riva. Io mastra a me. O figlia, da ogni vanna ecco ve a finì chi contra Dio n'ha usata lealtà, ma solo inganno, e muovono a passare all'altra via perché sta solo in cielo la giustizia che fa paura e intanto ce l'abbia. Ecco, passa sola la nequizia. Pure Caronte c'è rimasta male a vederti fra chi tanta vizia. Detto questo, la terra se ne cala, sottalipita in uvente sfera, mentre sudava fredda, tale o quale ne attinesse la freva, che la terra da una gran luce è stata illuminata, che m'ha stordita e m'ha gettata in terra come stasse a dormì e so cascata.
Hello, Professor Ferzocco. It's a pleasure to meet with you today, and we really appreciated your reading of the third canto in Abruzzese dialect. Before we start our conversation, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Hello, audience. My name is George Ferzocco, known to my family in Abruzzo, which is where my parents were born, as Piero. My full name is George Piero Ferzocco, but for my family and friends in Abruzzo, I'm Piero. So I go by two different names. I at this moment have the great privilege and honor of being the Emilio Goggio visiting professor in the Department of Italian Studies at the University of Toronto. And my base is at the University of Calgary, where I arrived at the beginning of this academic year. I had spent with my wife, Carolyn Musig, also an academic, we'd spent the previous 27 years in England, where I taught in universities of Exeter, Leicester, and most recently in Bristol. And I'm a medievalist by formation. I did my BA at the University of Toronto, born and raised in Toronto. So it's truly wonderful for me to be a part of this salute to Dante in this year of recognizing the great poet and on the 700th anniversary of his death.
Thank you so much. So Professor Ferzocco is one of the creators, with Professors Elisa Brilli and Nicholas Terpstra, of the Toronto Salutes Dante project. It would be interesting to explore the backstage of this idea. Would you like to guide us behind the scenes? How was it conceived, and what do you think are the most exciting aspects about it?
That's a really interesting question, Alice. When I was in England teaching Dante to students there, unlike Toronto, which has a very numerous and important Italian population within its city, as well as among the students it attracts, virtually no one that I taught, or a tiny number over there, had any Italian before they began to study at universities. So it was brand new to them. And like many students pretty much anywhere, they were very shy about speaking in Italian because they were very nervous about making mistakes. And I thought, well, maybe it could be fun if I could get the students involved in a kind of special event. And I thought it was worth a try. So I organized, in my first year of teaching there, a Dante marathon, in which each student would read aloud in Italian one of the cantos of the Inferno, or whatever terzina we were, cantica we were looking at in that semester. And I was really happily shocked to find the students genuinely loved it. They had this great sense of adventure and a shared experience of being a part of this marathon reading. Most of them, their timetables couldn't allow them, nor could their sanity or physical bodies allow them to stay for the entire time. But quite a few would stay from beginning to end, which would last roughly about 6 hours. And so I repeated this year after year, sometimes with little innovations like bringing in students from another language, colleagues from other departments, people from the general public. And so yeah, it became a real part of my annual calendar. It's something I looked forward to very much. And when Carolyn, my wife, and I moved to Canada late this summer in the middle of the pandemic, it really was virtually impossible to organize this sort of event. As my parents might say, fresh off the boat. But it happened that soon after I arrived, I had the good fortune of being invited to be the Emilio Goggio visiting professor. And in speaking with Professors Terpstra and Brilli, I mentioned that I used to do this, and given that it's the 700th year of Dante's death, might this be an event that could interest them? And to say I was gratified by their response is an understatement. They grabbed this idea by the horns and really made it happen. I can't thank them both, and you, Alice, and Natapol, and so many others, and so many other organizations who've made this into, I think, a really exciting, fun event. And I hope it's one that can be continued and even magnified in the future.
Well, this is wonderful. And we actually thank you for having such an interesting idea, and also all the people who contributed to transform it into reality. I would like to ask you something about the canto and the translation. So you shared with us a reading of the third canto in Abruzzese. May I ask you more details about this translation? Did you choose a specific version of Abruzzese dialect? And what do you find the most interesting about it?
Well, I'm aware of two translations into Abruzzese. They're both from the 1960s, demonstrating maybe the cultural resonance and excitement that was extant in Italy around the year 1965, which was the 700th anniversary of the birth of Dante. A little like what we're doing here in 2021, the 700th anniversary of Dante's death. Now, the translation that I've used here is by a poet and linguist, Giuseppe Perrozzi. He translated the first 5 cantos of Inferno. There's another translation by Angelo Umberto Scarano, who's a great figure in the Italian judiciary, as well as an accomplished writer and poet. He published his translation of the entire Inferno, and his unpublished translations are preserved at the archives in Abruzzo's main city, where he lived, and that's Pescara. Unsurprisingly, Scarano chose the dialect of his native Pescara, while Perrozzi wrote in his own local dialect from the city of Vasto, which is just a bit farther south on the Adriatic coast from Pescara. Now, I chose the Perrozzi translation in good part, I've got to say, as a loving tribute to a wonderful person very dear to our family, Marianna Di Polito, who is from Vasto. Also, there is a really excellent a YouTube channel called Abruzzo Forte e Gentile, and there one can find a reading of the entire translation by a very talented man named Angelo Iocco, who's also read parts of Scarano's translation. But I find the Perozzi translation, the Vasto version, fascinating on several counts. One is the way it compares and contrasts with other Abruzzese dialects, not just from nearby Pescara, but also with that from of Corfino, which is in the center of the peninsula, whereas Vasto, like Pescara, is on the Adriatic coast. I couldn't resist making some changes to the first three lines just to get in some of the sounds of Corfinese, so that maybe a difference could be heard between those words and the sounds of Vastese. Corfinese has, I think, a richer, more musical spectrum of vowel sounds in particular that simply don't seem to exist, at least to my ear, in the more direct and comparatively precise dialect of Vasto. Overall, though, the Vasto version compared to the Pescara version, I think, lends itself to an oral and aural experience. It has, I think, real passion. It reverberates throughout the reading, and this makes it fun for me to read and hopefully enjoyable for people to listen to as well.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Ferzoco, for this really interesting conversation. We were honored to have you here also as a reader, and thank you again for both having this beautiful idea and help us transform into reality.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you so much, Alice, and thanks you and all who have participated in this.